In American society, money is a taboo topic. We're taught at a young age it's improper to talk about it, but we're also bombarded with messages about the power and importance of money in our everyday lives. And by not talking about it, we miss out on the skills and lessons we need to effectively understand and financially plan. That changes today. Welcome to Money Tales. Hosted by Sandy Brager and Cami Doder, Money Tales brings more than 35 years of combined professional experience in personal finance to demystify money and demonstrate what it's like to speak openly about personal financial matters. Join us each episode as they interview modern-day movers and shakers about how money decisions intertwine with their daily lives in order to give you better insight into productive financial conversations. Subscribe today and register for our blog Fathom at aspiriant.com/podcasts to increase your money mojo. And now, here's Cami and Sandy.
AJ Schneider is our guest on Money Tales this week. At just 4 years old, AJ's world was forever altered when her sister was diagnosed with a brain tumor the size of a golf ball. The family found themselves facing a nightmare. In the face of adversity, AJ's family fractured. As AJ tells us, there was no unity, only separation. For her, this pivotal moment solidified every negative belief she held about the world. Fear of abandonment, the need to flee, a pervasive sense of insecurity. As AJ watched her sister's illness unfold, she couldn't ignore the disproportionate role finances played in her family story. AJ believes that money should have never been a factor, that they should have instead focused solely on healing and supporting one another. Let me tell you more about AJ. She founded Beyond the Green Coaching in 2020 after working one-on-one with clients for 2 years. AJ was inspired to start the company because she knows how important it is to have a support system.
Here are 3 key money topics AJ hits on in this conversation. First, how money shows us who we are in real time. How we spend, how we talk about money, how we feel about money, and how we feel when other people talk about money are all reflective of our own inner world. Second, how it's possible to navigate unfolding traumatic and painful situations so that the financial implications do not add to the trauma. And third, what it was like for AJ to have $70,000 of credit card debt and realize that no one was coming to the rescue. We hope you share this episode with a friend, and please subscribe to Money Tales on your favorite podcast platform. Now on to our conversation with AJ Schneider.
Welcome to the Money Tales podcast. I'm Cami Doder.
And I'm Sandy Brager.
Sandy, I'm reading a great book I want to talk about. It's a book I've had on my to-do reading list. It's called Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yes, I know that book. I heard him speak about it at a conference a couple years back.
Oh, I'm jealous. I am loving it. It is hitting me at a perfect time. But specific to this conversation here at Money Tales, I thought it was fascinating when he talked about something called the Diderot effect. For our listeners, I'll share, I didn't know there was a name for this. It's wanting things you don't need. And specifically, it states that obtaining a new possession often creates a spiral of consumption, which leads you to acquire more new things. And as a result, we end up buying things that our previous selves never needed to feel happy or fulfilled.
Wow. That's an interesting effect.
And there's a whole story. I won't tell you the whole story and let you get on Wikipedia as to why we call it the Diderot effect. But I thought it'd be a fun question for you, Sandy. I'm putting you on the spot. Have you ever experienced the Diderot effect?
Perhaps when I was younger, if I'm being honest. I'm one of those people who's very thoughtful about how she spends her money. I don't think today in my life I experienced the Diderot effect in an unplanned way.
Good for you. I think it happens to me a lot.
Oh, say more.
It's small stuff, but it adds up. I think that's kind of the point. The minute I heard about this, I thought about a shopping trip I mentioned to you. I was at a friend's and she's got a boutique and I bought all these great clothes and they were at these amazing prices. I get home and I was like, oh, I got these cute dresses. I need new booties. Need, in quotation marks. I need leggings to go with them. I need. And so I more than doubled what I had spent on the clothes and what I invested in to bring these outfits to life. I didn't need them to spark that joy.
But you wanted them.
I wanted them. I appreciated that. There's an example in the article. Some people sign up for CrossFit, and next thing you know, they're buying the Under Armour outfits and the bands and the this and the that they don't necessarily need. And it's that spiral. And I just thought it was important to highlight here, and makes me think of Courtney Kingston as a guest. She talked about not moving your goalpost, making sure you keep it in check, that you want these things before you move the goalpost.
I think that's a good idea to have in mind, especially when you're going to try a new activity or a new experience, really focusing on what it is about that activity or experience that's calling your heart to it. And when it comes to the spend, what are you willing to spend on so that you go into it with open eyes and awareness? That can help. I do also think that if you're trying something new and different, it's okay to spend if you have it within your budget and your desires to really enjoy yourself. And, there's nothing better than a great new outfit too.
Totally agree. All right, let's see if our guest on Money Tales might have some perspective on any of this. Welcome, AJ Schneider. It's fantastic to be talking with you today.
It's so nice to talk with you, Cammie and Sandy. I love James Clear and I love Atomic Habits. So I'm so happy that you brought that up. A few thoughts that came to my mind, I'll start backwards, was about confidence and how it's really difficult to embark in something you don't feel confident in. So I'm thinking back a million years ago when I first found yoga, and I took my first yoga class and then immediately went into Lululemon and bought 3 pairs of pants, a mat, a block, and a bag.
Oh, those mats are expensive.
I bought the worst bag because it was the cheapest bag that they had. And I remember trying to shove it was just like a disaster, but I was like, I'm going to be a yogi now. And I think there's like an armor, that feeling of I need to personify the version of myself that I want to be. And how in the work I do with people with money, it's that lack of confidence. So they don't even want to start. It's that feeling of, I don't have a suit of armor. I don't know how to navigate this. Let me go buy 10 finance books so I can feel better about my position in this situation.
That's a great point, AJ. And as you're speaking, I'm remembering a movie from the 90s called Singles. And there's a character in that movie, if you saw it, who was really interested in finding a boyfriend. And she gets into all these different activities, cycling being one of them. So she goes and spends all this money to look like a cyclist and blend in because that's where she's going to find her guy. It's a funny example of this Diderot effect. And certainly in that movie situation, confidence was a factor here.
That's so funny. And that brings up the second point I was thinking about as you both were talking about idealism. And I have had a very beautiful new relationship with idealism as becoming a mom, because I had this vision of what I thought it would be and the type of mom I would be, and breastfeeding and labor and this journey that it was nothing like. And I got very confronted with the idealism that was really harming my ability to be in the present moment and react to what was happening. And I think we get the cycling clothes to feel like I am a cyclist. Oh, I'm just going to bypass all the work and just get the clothes and get the gear and get the things and buy the books. And then I am that person, versus actually doing the hard work and realizing, oh, I have to do this work to become the person I want to be.
Oh, your mom example is so good. I absolutely know exactly what you're talking about, where I thought, I am going to do such a great job on all this. Life teaches you, you got to learn.
You have to learn. And that's a brilliant example, because becoming a parent, there is no end to what you could spend money on to arm yourself with goodies and things. And you're right, AJ, you don't really know until it happens and you get there what you need.
Oh, this is going to be fun. AJ, before we get further down this conversation, would you introduce yourself and share a couple pivotal moments that really impacted who you are today.
I am AJ Schneider, formerly known as AJ Walbrum. I am from New York City, and I own a company called Beyond the Green Coaching, where it started with just me, and now it's a team of 6 coaches underneath me, where we do one-on-one coaching, group coaching, couples coaching, and I work with small businesses on helping people heal their relationship with money through budgeting, getting out of debt, and building wealth, and using money as a teacher of self. My background is in yoga. I was a teacher for 8 years. I actually ended up becoming the teacher. I ended up working at Lululemon.
The investment paid off.
Yeah, to pay off the 3 pants and the yoga mat. I worked at Lululemon actually, and I became a teacher. I loved how when you got on your mat, you could see yourself in a very out of context way. And what money does is it shows us who we are in real time, how we spend, how we talk about money, how we feel about money, how we feel when other people talk about money is so reflective of our own inner world. So I help people heal their trauma around money and alchemically change the way they think about money so that they can really have the life they want. Yeah, all the money in the bank account is great, but what are you doing it for? Are you doing it for to become a mom? Are you doing it to start a business? Are you doing it because you want to feel confident, empowered? So that's the kind of work we do at Beyond the Green, and it's amazing.
What about for you? When did money start having meaning to you when you were young?
Money was always omnipresent in my life. It was ingrained very early that money was very traumatic and volatile. And that in order to have success, you had to have a lot of money. I want to share a story that captures my spirit and my experience. So when I was 4, my sister was diagnosed with a brain tumor the size of a golf ball. I think that on my mom's side, there was a lot of American dreamism. We built a business and they had 3 children and they had 7 grandchildren in 5 years. And all the kids were doing well. Everybody was successful. And then my sister got sick and it broke my family. There was no coming together. It was a separation completely. So much of my beliefs about the world were solidified in that moment. It was almost as if I was affirmed every negative belief about the world, that I was going to be abandoned by my family. I was going to be abandoned. I needed to run away. I wasn't safe. And I watched through that experience, finances played such a larger role in that story than they ever should have. Money should have never been a factor or a problem in this situation. It should have been all about the healing of the family and my sister, who's doing amazing, by the way.
Oh, thank goodness.
Oh, yes, she is my best friend and an amazing mom to 2 children and married the love of her life. And she's doing incredible. But she had the hardest road of anybody I know because she left that experience. Her face was paralyzed. She was blind in one eye, deaf in one ear. Kids were horrible to her. So I became this like activist, enraged little child fighting my big sister's battles, which is still who I am to this day, always fighting the fight. I dimmed my light because I was told you are lucky that you're not the sick one. Little girls should be seen and not heard. You should be quiet. You're too big. You're too much. And then I also internalized that as be bigger because I needed to distract from all of the mess. I needed to be audacious in a reckless way. I needed to be the bad child because she had to be the good child. So I became the class clown and very rebellious. And then on top of that, the financial piece was such a traumatic part of that whole experience. I've done so much healing on that, but it really wasn't until I met my husband. We met at sleepaway camp and we had a crush on each other.
Oh,
when we were 14 and 15. And then we didn't talk for 14 years and we reconnected at a wedding. A year into us dating, his dad got sick and he was in the hospital for a year and a half. It was the first time in my life where something really bad happened and money played no role in it whatsoever. It was just showing up at the hospital, being there for the family, dealing it one day at a time. And I was like, oh, this is how this should have been done. This is how things are supposed to be. You're supposed to just deal with the thing. And it doesn't have to be about the fear and the stress about money.
AJ, can you say more to compare and contrast those two different health emergency situations from a money perspective? Why did money play a role in your sister's situation? Why didn't it in your now father-in-law situation?
When I was little, I was given like all of the opportunities. I went to ballet class and gymnastics, and I had all those extracurriculars. And then when my sister got sick, that was all taken away from me. And it was explained, oh, we can't afford to do that anymore. There was like that feeling of being stripped of potential. And then it was just always a contentious thing. Give me money. From my mom to my dad, we need money to pay for everything for Amanda because there was a lot of rehabilitation. She was in PT, she was in karate, doctor's appointments. Everything was always so expensive. Everything was talked about money. My sister has to have reconstructive surgery every so often. It was always these huge expenses and we couldn't afford them, or we could afford them. But if we afforded them, other things would be taken away. And it wasn't like a healthy conversation of sacrifice, which I talk about with clients all the time. It was stressful and combative and being gaslit, being told I didn't want things versus it being explained and treated with integrity and respect. Whereas with my father-in-law, it was never a conversation. Everything felt like everything was hanging on the threads of if we could afford something or not. And then when I experienced the year and a half with my father-in-law and realized that never once was money brought up, I was like, oh, you could go through really hard things in life and it have nothing to do with money. And then I realized that we all are going to go through really, really hard things in our life. And if I could help one person not have to be stressed about money on top of what's already so traumatic and painful, then you're probably going to experience less trauma. There was so much trauma around what happened to my sister because everything felt like a battle that had to be won. You can't live life like that.
This is really interesting. And I want to stick with it a little longer because I'm curious about your sister's situation in terms of the family finances. No one is ever prepared for something as horrific as that to happen to their family. Based on your adult money coaching view now, as you look back on it, were your parents, do you think, not financially prepared for what was going on? Maybe it's a both and here. Or were they more influenced by the trauma of the situation unfolding and they were using money to manifest the struggles they were having as individuals, as a couple, as a family around having a sick child?
I think it's and or, but ultimately the latter is because they had no true financial literacy other than how to make money. They were always just trying to get the next thing in front of them. And it's a really tough place to be when you're dealing with the incredible trauma that they must have been experiencing of not only caring for a child who almost dies, but also caring for another child who is very much alive and young and toddlery. It was that lack of stability and security mixed with processing and dealing with the habits that they had already cultivated, which they were spenders. My parents were separated before my sister had her brain tumor, but they just spent and lived in this lifestyle that they weren't interested and willing to give up on top of everything else that was going on.
And so, AJ, you also referenced that they didn't have financial literacy. You're coaching now in this space. What does that mean to you? And when you see someone who has financial literacy or a family that does, how do you believe that is developed and nurtured?
Something that I appreciate as my older version of myself is that I was always destined to be an entrepreneur. My mom was an entrepreneur. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. And I feel this insanely proud sense of belonging in the entrepreneurial space. But just because you're an entrepreneur and you're passionate and you have drive in that way does not mean you have the tools, one, to know what to do with your finances, and two, to teach it. My mom's generation was my grandfather didn't really respect my mom as an authority to teach her anything about finances because she was a woman. So my mother thought she would marry someone who was going to handle the finances. And that was not my father at all. He loved that she was the one who made money. And they equated making money to being successful. Because as an entrepreneur, it's all about revenue. It's all about bringing in. It's all about day to day. They didn't have the conversations about the future. It was always in the present. They were living in a relationship where they wanted two different things from one another. My dad would have been the most phenomenal stay-at-home father ever. He would have loved that role. And my mom could have gone on and been like this mega, mega successful entrepreneur, but they both wanted different things from one another. And it was beliefs about gender, it was beliefs about themselves that really held them back from getting the right guidance and support.
I like that. So you said financial literacy then is about conversations about not just the present, the future, and it also is about not focusing on just the making of money, but also the consumption of it.
You articulated what I said very, very well. I would add that it's also the way you think and feel about money. I was just listening to the Budgetnista on Mel Robbins, and she was saying how every Thursday her father would have money school. And so she grew up in a family that talked about money. So even though she would go and make mistakes financially in the future, she wasn't afraid to talk about money. Money wasn't this secretive gatekeeping thing. It was very forward. And I think you have to be comfortable talking about money in order to even entertain the thought of becoming literate about it.
I really appreciate you sharing all of these experiences. And I'm curious, as you continue to grow up with these messages around what success was, how to think about money really from an earning standpoint, and then having the experience of being the healthy child when your sister was undergoing all of this medical trauma and care. How did that manifest into your relationship with money as you became an independent adult?
I equated a lot of the attention my sister got to being sick. And my sister is a total introvert. We're totally different. She's super shy. I am extroverted squared. And she didn't want the attention, but she got it. And I wanted the attention desperately. So there was a victim personality that I personified as I got older where I wanted to be rescued. And so I would put myself in these incredibly difficult financial situations and have to be rescued really from my mom. And sometimes actually from my sister too. If I'm going to be as honest as humanly possible, it was really my way of feeling seen. It was really my way of feeling like I mattered. And so I had to do so much work to realize that I didn't need to be rescued to matter, and I didn't need to be saved to matter, and that I was never going to have full autonomy in my life if I kept being dependent on people who will then have a say in my life. And you can't fully step into what you want to do if someone else is paying for it.
You started Beyond the Green coaching with a backstory around money and learning about your own finances and finding yourself in debt. Will you share more about that inspiration and then how you're taking that to your clients?
When I started getting my finances in order, it was 2016. My best friend had asked me to go to Sri Lanka maybe 8 months ago. Before that, we went to Brazil. And on the outside, on paper, I'm living this large life. I was so stressed about money. And it was actually same best friend. She invited me to a family vacation in Martha's Vineyard. On the way to Martha's Vineyard, my debit card, because I didn't have a credit card because I was in $10,000, $15,000 worth of credit card debt. And I was maxed out. I didn't have a credit card. And my debit card bounced 14 times. So I got 14 $35 charges. I didn't have 2 pennies. I couldn't buy her parents coffee to thank them for having me on this vacation. And the shame and embarrassment I felt, I wanted to rip my skin out. I was so uncomfortable in that situation. I felt so helpless and embarrassed. And I was like, I never want to feel this way ever again. I want my own family. I don't want to be a passenger in someone else's life. I don't want to go to someone's house and I can't afford to buy a coffee, let alone pay for dinner one night after they're spending thousands of dollars in me being there. I don't want to be in this situation ever again. At the same time, I was realizing no one was coming to rescue me. That magical $70,000 check was never coming in the mail. And I was like, I'm going to have to do this. If I don't want this, I have to do it. And I sat her down a few months later and I was like, I'm not going to go to Sri Lanka because I'm in $70-ish thousand worth of debt. I want to start my life and I know that money is the reason why I can't. And I was crying. I wrote notes. She's like, what's wrong with you? She like held my hand while I called the debt collector. They didn't pick up because it was a Sunday.
Wow. What a friend.
From day one, from the beginning, she saw it all. And it's so amazing. And she was a big challenger because she'd be like, let's go to the Soho House and get $22 espresso martinis.
Ditto.
Yeah. And I was like, we can totally do that. However, if we do that, then I can't go out with you the rest of the month because it's not in my budget. But we could go to this dive bar and get $4 gin and tonics. And she'd be like, okay, let's do that. And so she would challenge me and she would force me to stand in my boundaries. And she was the best. She'd be like, you have $600 in savings. Don't you feel amazing? And I'm like, that's all I have. But yeah, sure. And so as I embarked on this journey, I felt so alone and I felt like I was the only one who was going through it. And then once I started to see the fog lift, I was like, oh, other people are going through this too. A lot of other people, actually. Most people are actually going through this and I'm so not alone. And I re-met my husband who budgets and forecasts for a living and was really instrumental in helping me become this version of myself. When I moved to DC to be with him, I was living in New York City. And I was like, I'm really tired of teaching yoga. It's really difficult to make money as a yoga instructor. I've really tried and I can't do it. And I really don't want to waitress anymore. I just want to help people heal their relationship with money. Can I do that? Susie Orman was I didn't know anybody else. Can I do that? I'm going to try. And so I reached out to someone who I knew was struggling financially. And I said, can I give you coaching for free? But you have to give 175% to see if it like worked. I wasn't going to go invest in like a website and merch and be like, okay, it's a failure. And she tripled her income within 2 months. We came up with an amazing debt repayment plan and that was it. And it just started from there.
I love that story. I think it's amazing and good on you for fixing your situation and using the knowledge and skills that you've developed to help others. I want to drill in on your approach of helping this friend out for free, because that's sort of an interesting loop of people who need help because they're financially in trouble. They don't necessarily have money available to pay for that help. So how did you square that in your mind, AJ?
I'm so glad you asked that. No one's asked that before. I chose very intentionally. I chose a very specific person who I knew if she was successful, she would champion me and she would rally around me and she would promote me because I had seen the way she promoted other people's businesses, the way she promoted things that she believed in. I knew she would be a cheerleader and I knew she would bring business. And I took a risk because I agree. There's a lot of people who could say, I want this for free. And if I can get Danny to change her financial situation, then she will get me my clients. For the first 2 years of the business, 90% of my clients were offsprings of Danny.
You're a great marketer. That's a great strategy. You were intentional.
I was really intentional with her. No one ever gets to ask me that. I didn't just choose someone random. I know this is going to be a symbiotic relationship because she was just so great. If she believed in something, she would share it.
She's a connector.
She's the ultimate connector. This is who I want to work with. And then the results were just unbelievable.
I want to ask you for one piece of advice to give our listeners as it relates to having productive money conversations beyond what you've modeled today.
My intuitive download is don't wait for the other person to have the conversation because it's never going to happen. And it's never going to happen in the way you want it to happen if you're waiting for them to start it. Even if that means I'm really stressed about my parents' retirement and they're not talking to me about it. I'm trying to be respectful, but I need to know because should I be saving for that? Should I be taking the garage and making it a bedroom? I feel like I am uncertain. So I'm going to go and address this, even though they don't want to hear that. Or I've been dating my partner for 6 to 8 months and I don't really understand what he does. And I don't really understand how it works financially. I really like him and I really want to figure this out because I see a future with him. But how are we going to plan a future if we don't talk about money now? So I'm going to bring it up. You start the conversation.
Oh, AJ, that's such great advice. And especially bringing in the curiosity to those conversations. So thank you for that. Tell us, what's your next money conversation going to be and who's it going to be with?
My first one is personal. My husband and I just moved in with my mother-in-law and we are officially going to be mortgage free because we just rented out our place. I'm very excited. We're officially in a place where we can considerably save. So we're actually meeting with our financial planner to kind of go over that strategy because I work for myself. So how much do I need to be contributing to my solo K? And then our next 5-year goals and what can we do with the money and when can we start to take more risks? So I'm really excited to have that money conversation. I'm also doing a lot of small business conversations where I'm talking about personal finances within a small business because it's amazing if your business is making money, but if your business can't support your own lifestyle, your own savings goals, and your own debt, then it's not a business that's sustainable for you. It's a hobby that you probably put a lot of time and effort into. So I'm diving into a lot of really great money conversations of we need to make sure your business can support your lifestyle first, and then we can scale and grow the business.
Such important conversations, personally and professionally. AJ, where is the best place for our listeners to find you?
I'm super engaged and active on Instagram at Beyond the Green. I love talking to people in the space, so please reach out. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can also email me at hello@beyondthegreencoaching. I would love to hear from your listeners, answer any questions.
That is wonderful. AJ, you've got great atomic habits. You've modeled bravery and vulnerability during our conversation and through that shared that when you do that, good things can happen. Thank you for joining us on Money Tales.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Money Tales podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with someone you think would benefit from listening. And leave us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. Your ratings and reviews help more people find our podcast. If you're inspired to gain clarity and peace of mind about financial matters, don't hesitate to reach out to our team at Aspirient. Go to aspirient.com/start a dialogue. Or you can email Sandy and me at podcast@aspirient.com. See you next time.